Do not be afraid. I am here to take you to a good life. A life that you were born to. I beg you, Uncle, love her as I would were I here, and ensure that she is in receipt of all that is due to her as a child of mine.
Do you have in mind my position?
That is simply impossible.
What is right can never be impossible.
I heard a painting inspired the story. As the director, what motivated you to develop this into a feature-length film?
Whenever black people were painted alongside white people, they were usually a servant, painted lower down, never looking out at the painter, and usually reaching up in awe, looking up at the main white person in the painting, which would draw your eye to them. And when I saw this painting of Dido Belle and her cousin Elizabeth, who was raised as her sister, I could see that it was completely different and unique. The two of them are standing together as equals. They're painted the same height, so Dido's not lower down. Dido's looking straight out at us really confidently and pointing to herself. And it's actually Elizabeth's hand that's resting on Dido's arm, drawing your eye to Dido's. It was the complete opposite. So I looked at that and I thought, this is pretty radical. It's a kind of gift for a filmmaker, really.
Dido was a pioneer, rallying for the abolition of slavery and breaking social conventions of her time. Hundreds of years on, how can her story teach us a lesson now?
I hope give people the message that it's okay to challenge the conventions of society, because, you know, if no one ever did that, we'd never get anywhere. And I think, you know, even though Dido goes through her struggles, ultimately she sort of gains this courage to stand up for herself. And hopefully I think that's a good message for everybody today, to be able to, you know, have the courage of your convictions and be comfortable with who you are.
Papa, how may I be too high in rank to dine with the servants and too low to dine with my family?
Though I understand she is kept under interesting rules, she raises questions.
Would you do me the honor of taking some air with me?
Don't you care what people will say?
What should anyone say?
I had no idea she'd be so black.
One does not make a wife of the rare and exotic.
Does she still have a tongue? I have a tongue.
Though yours explains well enough why I may not marry your son. My greatest misfortune would be to marry into a family who would carry me as their shame.
It's like a Jane Austen story, but with a twist. What makes your story so different?
Because there's a black person in it. because really Jane Austen did, she did a story with a black girl in it, so that it's not as it's not completely unusual, but to have her right and front center in any story was important. To have that in a movie, even today, is unusual and important. And so this makes it Jane Austen, but it's not just of the genre. We've subverted the genre by having a black heroine and having her proactive in a more political way, I suppose.
How challenging is it to research real-life characters?
It can be quite difficult, especially when there's no sort of quintessential book that's written, you know, that brings all the history together and that's written about the characters, and you have to piece everything together from museums and libraries and go to the descendants that are living today and get pieces of information from them and little bits that might have been passed on through the family. That's quite difficult. You have to be patient. You have to spend a lot of time doing research, but it's worth it in the end. It's really worth it.
Costumes play a big part in bringing the world to life. Of course it's a nightmare, or do they really help with getting into character?
Wearing those costumes really, really help, because it completely changes how you stand and how you move, and having the corsets on, you know, gives you a completely different physicality. We also took some etiquette coaching classes where we had a sort of expert that taught us about the bows and the curtsies of the period.
Is it easy to discover good stories to tell on screen?
One of the most wonderful things about being a black filmmaker is that there are just so many of our stories that haven't been told. I mean, whichever sort of genre or type of film you want to tell, you could always find that there was a black person there whose voice wasn't heard. So that always interests me in a story. I also think that women's stories, you know, having good stories, and at any stage there are always good stories to be told, as long as your eyes are open and your ears are open and you're looking for them.